Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to part 2 of this modern rhythm power-up. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And now, let's get on to the lesson. Okay, so continuing with this power-up, we pretty much already know what we're playing. So for the next 2 videos, with some slight modifications in the next video, we're mostly going to talk about different ways to build the dynamic with this type of part. And a lot of it has to do with how we are striking the strings, how we are letting the notes ring out, etc. So in the previous video where we were just simply learning the rhythm, playing the rhythm, I was pretty much palm muting everything, which is fine. You can definitely do that. That sounds like this. Pretty normal. But today and in the next video, we're going to talk about different ways to build different levels of dynamic. Very similar to how we worked through the dynamics and dead notes power-up. We're going to have different levels of dynamics that we'll achieve throughout this power-up. So the first level that we're going to talk about is going to be pretty similar to what we just did, but it uses a technique that's really common in this style that are dead notes or ghost notes, as people call them, on the thick strings. So it might seem like or look like and even might sound like a palm mute, but it's actually not. They're straight up dead notes. So instead of doing this, this is just palm muting the whole time, right? What I'm going to do here instead is this. So notice what I'm doing. Pick, hammer on like normal, but for that next pick, I'm actually not pressing anything down with my left hand. I'm just getting this. Just dead notes, right? And I'm also kind of adding to the dynamic level by bringing down the level of that one hit by not only playing a dead note, but also picking that note or picking really just one string kind of soft. So you just hear a little tiny little sound in there instead of like a hard hit, like a palm mute. So again, let me play that. Right? So that one tiny little dead note is right in the middle of that phrase. Right there. Again, not applying pressure to my hand over here, or maybe just like dropping a ring finger down to mute everything, and then picking soft. That gives it a really nice kind of dynamic shape instead of always having the same exact palm muted accent like this, which is cool. That's definitely a cool sound. But here it is with the dead note. Right? So how we're going to approach this is pretty much like this. Every time you pick in between those hammer-ons, you're going to be doing a dead note instead of a normal pick. So like this. Here we go, normal pick hammer-on. But then this little pick right here is just going to be that dead note. And then the next two are going to be normal pick hammer-on, and then ending up with a normal pick at the end. So you kind of want to hear this. That's kind of the melody of the riff. So for the second half of that riff, where we do the 3 picks and then the hammer-on, you're going to have 2 dead notes in there like this. Right? There's our dead note, pick, hammer-on, 2 dead notes. Then pick, hammer-on, then normal pick. I'll do it one more time slower. Right? So every time we run through all of the chords of this power-up, that is where we're going to place those dead notes. And to be honest, I mean, you can kind of experiment with these dead notes however you want. You can place them wherever makes sense. This is kind of where they make the most sense for me, at least, for this riff. But you can experiment as much as you want. It's a really cool sound because, again, we're achieving different levels of dynamics. We don't always want to be going crazy, playing really hard, or palm muting really hard. It's kind of cool to get this like very subtle dynamic because it allows the music to build in intensity, right? And you can do that by simply playing the riff in a different way. Here it is with the second one up top. It's very, very present there. If I just palm muted everything, it's a cool sound for sure, but listen to this one. It's way more kind of subtle. And again, that's all just me literally playing dead notes. I'm really just playing maybe 1 string, maybe 2 strings if I happen to do a larger pick stroke, and then the rest is normal. So sneak in those dead notes inside of the normal riff that you've been playing. It should feel pretty much exactly the same with your right hand, except the left hand is just going to be releasing pressure so that you get dead notes instead of actual fretted palm mutes. Like that. I'll play a little bit slower so you can really hear it. Like that. And I'll maybe throw something up on the screen so it kind of makes more sense where you're placing these. So that's level one. We're going to play the first repetition of the part with that lower dynamic using the dead notes. The second level dynamic is going to be kind of bringing the palm mutes back into play. So we're pretty much going to be playing full notes, not really doing dead notes ever. But what we are going to do is we're going to start playing the pick into the hammer-on as an open sound, not a muted sound. So here's a muted sound. We're going to do this like that. So the part now sounds like this. So that one's really easy. Whenever you're playing a pick that's going into a hammer-on, you're simply going to play that note open without a palm mute. Right? So that's kind of the sound. It kind of brings that hammer-on out a little bit because you're playing that open note and then blasting that hammer-on right afterwards. So that's going to be level 2 dynamic that we're going to play here with these backing tracks. So with that technique, the dead note technique is pretty straightforward. You're just kind of picking like you normally would, maybe a little softer, releasing pressure over here. But for this sound, where you're doing a kind of mixing palm mutes and once in a while throwing in an open sound in there, meaning just playing the strings normally, no palm mute, there's a certain technique that makes this a lot easier because what we're doing is we're bouncing back and forth from a open sound to a palm muted sound. And there's a technique that I think works really well to do this. So if I just play just that back and forth, right? That's me playing open, muted, open, muted, open, muted, open, muted. If you can see what my right hand is doing while I'm doing that, see if I can turn my guitar here. There we go. Looks pretty good. So I'm doing this. Instead of like palm muting like this and then just simply lifting my hand, I'm palm muting like this. My pick is up top. I'm bringing it down. And then when I do that open, it's like I'm bouncing off like this. Right? So I'm not lifting my hand like this. I'm actually turning it like that. So here I am picking. The pick stroke naturally leads my hand into a little twist like that, which lifts my hands off the strings, which makes it a lot easier to kind of more smoothly transition from the palm mute to that open. I'm kind of exaggerating it right now, but that's kind of what you're doing. When you go down to hit that pick, you're turning your hand at the same time, lifting your palm off the strings, releasing the mute. It's a lot easier than trying to like do a palm mute like this and just like lift your whole arm, because that feels kind of awkward because you're doing two different muscle movements right there. You've got the pick movement and then you've got your arm moving. But with this motion where you pick kind of like this, like a turn of the wrist, you can do both of those things in one go. You can pick the string and gently lift the palm off the strings at the same time. Like that. It feels like you're kind of bouncing up and down. Right? It's a very, very subtle little motion, but it can make things a lot easier, especially with stuff like that. So I would really experiment playing with that technique because it'll make it so much easier. Again, I'm picking kind of coming from up here, going down, and when I'm picking, that is releasing my palm mute, and then I simply put it back when I want to palm mute and continue. So that's going to be level 2 dynamic. So I'll play that a little bit. You can see what that sounds like. So actually, here's level 1. I'll play that first. Etc. Now here's level 2. Again, a little bit more open with those ringing out notes. And again, that little transitional extra beat that we talked about in the previous video, that's going to be actually, in this case, a simple down up. So that'll look like this, like that. So pick, hammer on, that's an open, no muting. Then a simple down up takes us to the next part. So that's really it for this power up. It's mostly playing, or really for this part of the power up, it's mostly playing the parts that we already know, but applying these different levels of dynamics. So of course, the dynamic level will show up on the screen. You match it as best as you can. You can honestly experiment with whatever you want to do, but if you want to follow me, that is the structure I'm going to do. I'm going to be doing the dead notes first, and then the ringing notes along with the palm mutes. etc. So it's pretty much it for this one. Again, we're going to go through 3 different backing tracks that will transition between those 2 levels of dynamics. The tracks are still going to be 90, 100, and 110. So let's get on to those tracks. All right, that does it for part 2 of this modern rhythm power-up. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I'll see you in part 3.